try to figure out where all these light switches are.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm glad to see we have a nice group here tonight. And tonight we're going to have, our guest speaker will be for Places and Faces is Reverend Ken Boettcher. Ken will show and narrate his slides of Egg Harbor past. He's a native of Marinette, where he spent his high school or his childhood looking across the 16 miles of Green Bay to the bluffs of Egg Harbor. We finally got him over here now. He began his ministry in Egg Harbor from 1965 through 1969. Being transferred elsewhere around Wisconsin, he finally came back to the United Methodist Church in November of 1994 in Sturgeon Bay. He and his wife, Ann Ellen, have stayed in Sturgeon Bay since he retired, and we're glad he did. He's an asset to our community. So I'd like to invite you, put your hands together, and let's welcome.
Thank you, Gloria. And I'm mic'd for the camera, but I guess not for you. But can you all hear pretty well if I speak like this? Typically, I'm heard. Before we get into the pictures themselves, I might just spend a few moments reflecting upon Door County and Egg Harbor. It's really, what I remember, what I did here back from 1965 until December 1st, 1969, when I moved on to another location. As Gloria mentioned, I'm from Marinette, which isn't very far from Egg Harbor, and I was closer to Egg Harbor than I am now living in Sturgeon Bay. And I swam on the beaches over in Marinette many times as a youngster, and I've been trying to recollect how many times I came to Door County before I moved to Egg Harbor to be the pastor. I can remember 4 visits. And that's not uncommon because, as you know, Door County is not on the way to anywhere. It's a destination. And unless you decide to come here because it's where you want to go, you don't get here. And there are many people around the state of Wisconsin who have never been to Door County because the highway is a dead end on the north side. So, coming to Door County was a thrill when I was told by my district superintendent back in 1965 after I graduated from seminary that I would be going to Egg Harbor to serve the church there. But not just the Egg Harbor Church. There was a circuit of 3 churches. It was Egg Harbor Calvary, Fish Creek Community Church, and Gibraltar Zion Church. Back then, the Egg Harbor Church and the Gibraltar Church were Evangelical United Brethren churches, reflection upon the German heritage here in at least the section from Egg Harbor to Sturgeon Bay. It was very German. In fact, there had been more churches than that previously in this area. It was consolidated finally to 2 churches in the early part of the century. And so I had the appointment or the assignment of these 3 churches. Came here as a new pastor right out of seminary. Tried all my best tricks on the new people who I was ministering to, learning how this job was done, and I had a very good time. And on Sunday morning, I would get up and would go to Fish Creek for 9 o'clock service there at the community church. Then I was back to Egg Harbor for 10:10 for a second service. And then I was to be out at the Zion Church in Gibraltar Township at 11:15 for the 3rd service of the morning. And I never made it there by 11:15. But it was a family group. And they were together for Sunday school. And from the time Sunday school ended until the time I got there, they would have their conversation and their after worship stuff before worship. So I would get there sometimes as late as 11:30, and if the Packer game started at 12, we were in trouble. Anyway, but by 12:15, the service would be finished, and pretty much everyone had talked themselves out, the door would be locked, and away we'd all go. So that was a bit of what I did here in Door County. And again, I came here, it was mid-June, like June 15th, 1965, and I stayed until I was appointed to the Mayville and Horicon churches on December 1st, 1969. But a few other things that I did while I was here, which reflect, I think, a little bit upon the time. One day I got a call from the principal at the high school. They needed a substitute teacher. I never taught. I didn't have any education degrees, as you know, formally. And when you're young, you're not real smart all the time. And I said, sure, I'd try that. Now, I had a full-time job being a pastor, trying to keep up with 3 congregations of the people. But I, was willing to venture forth, and so I began substitute teaching. And every once in a while, I get that phone call in the morning, hey, we need a sub today. And it sometimes was English. It may have been mathematics. I taught for a whole week industrial arts. I didn't have any background in these areas, but I could read books, and I would try to get ahead of the students. And then I would go, even in math, I would confess, hey guys, I don't really know what this is all about, but you're going to teach me today. And so I put them up the blackboard to have them teach me how this stuff all worked, and I figured that was, for them, a fairly decent education. And it worked very well. I had a good time, and created some tests during the time I taught for a whole week, and even the principal was impressed. Your substitute was actually testing the kids on what he had taught them over the week and things like that, so that was fun. I also got to know Raleigh Jorns pretty well. You know Raleigh up in Egg Harbor has the maple syrup place. He drove school bus, and he liked to go deer hunting and moose hunting and bear hunting up in Canada. So he said, Ken, how would you like to be a substitute bus driver? So Ken said, sure, I'll try that. So I had to get my chauffeur's license to drive a school bus, and I succeeded in passing. And when Raleigh was out hunting, I would drive his school bus route for him. And it was really very interesting and very helpful to me because I got to know all of the kids. I learned where they lived. And so I would, 6:15 or so in the morning, I can't believe they make kids get up this early to go to school, but I had a hard time getting up. And I would go from Egg Harbor down Highway T to the beginning of the route and begin picking up kids and hauling them back to Egg Harbor, up the highway, along 42, picking up youngsters and getting up to the high school most of the time on time. And you had to really be disciplined to make that all happen. So again, that was a reflection, I think, especially the teaching part upon life in the 60s. I don't know if a minister would qualify to be a substitute teacher any longer. But I had 2 degrees, college degrees or graduate degrees, so I guess I worked okay. During the first summer here, I was married. I married my sweetheart from Menominee, Michigan. Brought her over here in the second week of August. And she is a college graduate, graduated from North Park University in Chicago in music. And so the first week we were here, she said, I got to go find a job. I said, wow, I got a wife who wants to work. That's awesome. And so we went to Sevastopol schools and found Carl Scholes. Many of you know Carl. And sat down with him, and Carl said, I've got a position for you, to my wife. They needed a librarian for the school. Fantastic. And that was her foot in the door, and the next year she became the vocal music instructor and had the choir and kept that for 2 more years. By the end of the school year in 1968, she was 6 months pregnant with our first son. So that ended her teaching career up here at Sevastopol. And she has done teaching off and on other places, substitute teaching a lot in other communities we've lived in. So that's how she got connected. And I'm trying to think of the teacher's name that she rode to school with, but she lived in Juddville. How many of you lived here in the 60s in Door County? Raise your hands. Okay, I got some helpers here, so if I stumble, you can help me. Anyway, and she would come to Egg Harbor and pick up my wife, and then go down to the downtown Egg Harbor and pick up Henry Gilson. He taught at Sevastopol also, and they would ride to school together. And names, you know how it is, they come in and out all the time, and I can't remember her name, but so that happened there for the 3 years that my wife taught. And so, we had a good time here. We really got connected. Oh, another thing that I did, these are things not on the slide, so I have to tell you about this, is that a group of gentlemen came to me one day and said, we need a scoutmaster. And so I'd been a Cub Scout as a youth, and we had a half a dozen, 8 young boys around town, and they were a scout troop, and so I got roped into being the scoutmaster, and had a good time associating with the young boys, and did a lot of things with them. We did some winter hikes and went to Bear Paw and did some other things. So it was another way in which I was able to connect into the community and get to know some of the people here, and that was still back in the day almost when Egg Harbor was still the old town. Now, Gus lived here back before I did, and it was really old when you lived here, right? But Gus Abrahamson, if you don't know him. The pictures up here are awesome. They really reflect. You can see so much of the community as it was when I lived here, and it changed slightly. And of course, since I lived here and left, it's totally different now, and it has become very modern. Anyway, okay, to connect into the slides, you all came here to see pictures, and I have some fairly neat pictures. And this past Sunday, let me just first of all say, when I came to Egg Harbor in June of 1965, I had the joy of being the pastor working in a brand new church building that had just been completed in April of that year, dedicated on Palm Sunday, like April 5th. Previous to that, the church had worshiped in the old stone church right along the highway that you're acquainted with. And it was not, by our standards today at all, a very good facility. It had no running water, no restrooms, no place to gather. It was simply a room for worship. The new church in Egg Harbor, and it's now 40 years old, but it's new yet to me, was built beginning somewhere probably around 1962, I would imagine. I don't really know the exact dates. And it was a church that has kind of a miracle story to it. The Egg Harbor congregation wanted to build a new church. They had some plans. Even they had some dimensions, I think, kind of in their minds as to what they wanted. Did a little probing. They were a very small congregation, probably didn't have the money to do much with. But one day they got a call from the unit structure company in Peshtigo, where they make the big arches. And they had a set of arches with roof decking that they had constructed for a church in Illinois, hauled it down there only to find that the dimensions were off. And they were no good to that church they took them to. So they had a white elephant. Called the people in Egg Harbor to find out if the dimensions they had would be accommodating here. And I don't know if they happened to fit perfectly or if the church made them fit perfectly, one or the other. But they purchased, and I'm going to shoot a number out that I think they bought them for, as I recollect is all in my head. For $30,000, they purchased the arches and the decking for on the roof. which was about half the price of the finished product of the church. Ended with about a $60,000 debt, as I recall. And so they got going, the church began. Now, on Sunday of this past week, I was in church in Sturgeon Bay. For some reason, my being here has been in the newspaper, and people were saying, Ken, you're going to be at Egg Harbor doing a program on Wednesday, aren't you? Gus is here, and Doug McGee are here because of that. And the daughter of one of the people who was very involved in building the church at Egg Harbor came to me Sunday and said, Ken, I have 2 trays of slides of Egg Harbor. I said, wow. She said, I don't want them. I said, well, bring them over. I'll look at them. So I went through them, and they were slides detailing the construction of the church. I'm not going to show them to you. You don't want to see all of that. But I picked some out. Because a part of my story, a part of my being in Egg Harbor is about that church. I mean, that's why I'm here, was here then. That's why I'm here tonight. It was about that church in Egg Harbor. So we're going to begin somewhere about 1962 when construction began on the church. Then we'll move on. I have a different set of my other slides. And I'll try to stand here, not be in people's way, and not hang you on my rope here. This is the unit structure truck coming into the driveway alongside of the old church, delivering the arches that the church had purchased. Get my... Okay, you got it square there? I'll check the focus here a little. There we go. And I'm guessing approximately 1962, it's in the spring, maybe it could be the spring of 63. The church was finished in 65. And the church was, well, you're going to see some of that here anyway. The church was constructed by volunteer labor. And the head construction engineer was the pastor at the time, who was Merlin Gehring. He was my predecessor up at Egg Harbor. And his father was in construction, and Merlin flew airplanes. He went to seminary, became a pastor, and he never forgot how to build. And I don't want to, sorry, yeah. You get a good vantage point here. Anyway, so as you well know, underneath the ground here is all rocks, and so you can see all the rock that had to be blasted out of the foundation area. I can even squat down here a little bit. I'll help you. No, I don't want to be in your way. Anyway, so that's the first of the arches going up. And this is jumping way ahead. From the top of the church building, this was a picture then of Egg Harbor. So you can see the Trio restaurant does not exist here on the corner. Thank you. Thank you. And you see the Alpine across the way there. You can just see the cupola house down the left-hand side in the center. And prior to that, what you just saw was obviously the groundbreaking. And so here you have the parade of people coming out of the old church on the highway. That's the parsonage behind there, coming to this lot where the church was to be built. That's what I thought. Thank you. Gus just helped me affirm. That's Rose Wilson. They had the resort on the corner there in Egg Harbor. The Brownies bought it from them, right by the church. The Wilsons owned that motel. And Rose was the matriarch of the family. There was Helen, and lived with her. And on the right is the Miller family. I mentioned Susie gave me, hold that a second. Susie gave me the slides, and Susie, these are the Millers here. No, it doesn't look like Susie, but I'm not sure. She should be here. This is her father. This is Virgil Miller, if you knew him, and some of his boy, Randy, there. And anyway, Virgil's the one who took all these pictures. And then construction began on the church. And this is looking back toward the north. You can see the restaurant, what's called the Egg Harbor Restaurant now on the left side. Joe Schneider used to live there. And looking from the church parsonage, that's the Wilson cottages on the right here. That's the church foundation straight ahead. And here's the work crew. Now there's Hoyt Vroom in the front center, and other people, both local and from out of town. And there you see the hotel there, the condos as they were back then, the tourist cottages. The church was built by volunteers, and in the summertime and in the autumn, people would show up with campers from all over Wisconsin and camp in Egg Harbor over the weekend or for a week and help build the church. That is one of the daring females.
That's Myrtle.
That's Myrtle Johnson, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad I got Gus here. Myrtle Johnson. And I recall stories of her being the only woman who would go up on that roof. You know, it got steeper and steeper the higher you got. It was about straight up and down. And see the little notches on the beams? They made ladders on every one of the beams so you could climb up to the peak. And as I understand it from the unit structure company, they got the arches and also the wood on the roof, which was decking, I think especially designed for the roof. And there are the people way up on the peak. No one really wanted to do that. Fortunately, Merlin Gehring, the pastor, he was willing to do that. So he had wings, I guess, or whatever. So. The person nearest to us, I think, is Don Luigi. He's still around. If you know, Don lives down West Jacksonport. And that's looking south again toward the village. You see it in the background. When I looked at this slide before I put it into the projector to look at, I thought they're having a funeral outdoors. It looked like a coffin to me on the trailer there, but it turns out to be a camper. And and behind the old church was an outhouse. That was its facility, and it served probably all the people who came camping, because that's all there was. And so this was typical. People would bring their campers and stay here and work on the church. Did Wilsons own that property before the church was there? Do you have any idea? It was right adjacent to them. I don't know if they gave the property or how that worked. Here are some of the construction volunteers. Reverend Gehring, the pastor, is right here. Reverend Gehring finally retired in my hometown of Marinette, had the United Methodist Church there. And then he served the church and he retired. And not too long after he retired, he suddenly died one day. And it was kind of sad. He was a very energetic, hardworking guy. Could do anything. He was a daredevil. He flew airplanes, would crash them and get up and find another one. And so going up to the peak of the church was no big deal. See how straight up that is? So you had a lot of passionate builders to volunteer to come and do this. I work for Habitat right now, and it's fun building things, but I would never go up in a roof like that. And again, from the peak of the church, that's a view of the village. And looking the other direction toward the parsonage and the old church. And on a clear day, you can see Marinette. after we moved here and lived here, on the 4th of July, sometimes I'd walk across the road to the edge of the bluff, and I could watch the fireworks in Marinette, Menominee. And if you look across, you can see there's 2 water towers now. There used to be only one when I was a kid, and I lived about 4 blocks from the water tower. So I wasn't far from home. I could see the water tower. And that's the laying of the cornerstone. That's Pastor Gehring. Okay, the cornerstone was laid in 63. So the church must have been begun in 62. And there's a group of people who are at that cornerstone laying service, and it's kind of dark. I can't pick any of them out right now. But that's the group in the kitchen. Evelyn Miller's on the left, far left. In the center is Evelyn's sister. Shop?
Shop, yeah.
Yep. She's,
And the other one, isn't she from Death Joel's mother,
is that Margaret Reinhardt?
Reinhardt?
Margaret Reinhardt is the second from the right, going this way.
One on the right side.
I don't recognize the other ones. They may have been helpers from outside. Now, I can't determine whether they're baking for a working crew or cooking, or it's another occasion or not. But this is in the kitchen then of the new church. And then I have to change to another. These were the slides I got from Sandy Miller that Virgil had taken. I thought they would be of interest because they were to me. As I say, I have 100 of them like that, but I only favored you with a few. And this is where I enter the picture. See, those are all pre-Ken Boettcher time. When I came, this is how the church looked. This was the stage of construction. And I was here to watch the bell put on in the bell tower. And I helped to lay some of the stones there. By that I mean I helped hand the stones up to the mason who was putting the stones down. And you see the driveway is not finished there yet under the carport.
And do you know who the mason was?
Yes, it was a Gauger. So I remember the last name is a Gauger, and I'm not sure his first name any longer. And all of the stones in the church are native stone. They're all limestone out of the ground. Everything was collected locally. And so we always had to find, there are big piles. You can't see them right here. In some of the other pictures, you can see the big piles of limestone. And they came from, stone piles in fields. They tried to get stones with exposed edges because every edge is a weathered edge, not a fresh cut edge or a broken piece. So all of the exposed edges are weathered, and so we always had to be looking for weathered edges. And there I go. And we had a sign down the highway back in my day. George Hoslet, if you remember George, Dorothy Hoslet's husband. Dorothy just died in the last year. He was a sign person, a sign painter. And so he constructed that sign for the church and put it up. It was down somewhere around Sunny Point. And that's a picture of the church from the top of the Ames Hill coming down on E. A little closer, and in a little bit, you're going to see 2 homes between us and the church. But at this point, the homes are not built there yet. And you see in the background what is now the Egg Harbor Restaurant. Again, Joe Schneider ran that, and that's the church parsonage in the white. Still the church parsonage today. Another view of the church, and now you see a home built there. That was Herb Anschutz. He was the postmaster when I was here. He built a house there, and then his mother-in-law built alongside of him. And the left-hand side was orchard that belonged to Murphy Moore.
Was the road gravel?
No, I think it was blacktop. Yeah, it may have, yeah. And this was from the garage roof of the parsonage. Again, looking back to the church, you see the cottages. And while I was here, the Wilsons moved away. Rose and Helen moved to Waupun to be by Rose's son, Jim. And Mr. Browning bought that corner. I don't know if he still owns it or if it's changed hands. I'm not sure. And that's a picture of the old church, and that's my wife standing in front of it. And after we built a new church, it was like, what did we do with the old church? There wasn't a whole lot to do with it. It had no facilities. It was, you just walk out the front door, you're in a highway. Well, we for about 2 summers, we had a coffee house in there, and we had kids come in, and we had some guitars and would sing some songs a couple of evenings a week, and tried to make it a bit productive in that regard. And from, again, I think it was from either my house or the bluff across the road, I'm not quite sure the vantage point. This is the view of the bay. From over the top of the Alpine, they have that tower there. I don't know if it's still there or not. They used to have a tower behind the Alpine up in the bluff. And looking back toward the village, can't get everything in focus at one time, but you can see the church up on the left-hand side. You have the church here and the barn by the Wood Orchard place right now. And that's Gloria's place there, I think. We get it focused. The cupola house in the middle there somewhere shows up. The same vantage, only in the autumn here. You can see things a little bit better. Oh, the cupola house, you can see with the dome on it over there. Yeah, the cupola. You can't get everything focused in the same time here. Again, I'm taking pictures of the church from different places around town. You see always the churches in the center, the church I served. But this is a great picture. I wish I had, if I had known I was going to be here today doing a program, I would have done a little bit differently, I'd have gotten a Catholic church in the picture. But this is the parsonage there. And what's interesting is one of my friends who was a minister who had a summer home in Egg Harbor, Bill White, and I think his son still lives in Egg Harbor. There's a Bill White, I think, same name, in the summertime. He was a pastor in Illinois, and he was a pastor of the Chicago Temple for a while, if you're acquainted with Chicago. And he said, Egg Harbor is an interesting town. There's a pillar on either end and 7 taverns in between. And our church and the Catholic church in this end. And but this was how the road looked back then. Now, these are some people you might know. This was Vacation Bible School, probably about 1967 or 68. And again, I wish I could get everyone focused at one time. A couple of the Boettcher girls, Bill and Marie. And one of them runs the Alpine today, one of the girls. These are 2 of their girls. These are 2 of their girls here, I think. No, that might be one of that one. They're twins, and they had 4. This is Sandy Miller, who gave me the slides, her father's slides. This was her. She's now 45-ish, more than that. She was like 4 years old when I was here as a pastor. So that's 40 years ago. Something like that. She was 5 years older, probably there. Somebody knows her here. Lauren Erskine. And a bunch of other people I should be able to recognize, but I don't. The Keno kids would be on here, Alan Keno's children. Bonnie works for Eric Paulson in the Door County Eyes right now. Bonnie, she's probably on this picture. She was the little girl in the family. Trying to see who else. And the tallest one here is Steve Polster. Any of you know Steve Polster? Steve Polster today is the assistant to the bishop of the United Methodist Church in Wisconsin. And I had him he was young here, and then I had him in my confirmation class. And he's done very well as a United Methodist pastor, and for the last 10, 12 years has really been the bishop. You know, bishops, they move in and out. He's been the one stable in the office. He kind of runs the place. The bishop just gets the name. So he's done very well. And anyway, that's our vacation Bible school group that one year. Probably the only tourist attraction in Egg Harbor back in 1967 was Stagecoach Junction. He recognized the building. It's still there. It was transformed from a granary or a farm supply place to a tourist attraction. And they ran the stagecoach and a trail around behind the village, and you paid to have a ride. And it was kind of neat. Well, sometimes slides don't drop. There was one of some people on it, but so once in a while they don't drop down. Alpine Golf Course, the same, and yet it has changed. It has doubled in its size since I was here, with 2 more 9s being added on. This is the old back 9. I used to golf there regularly. This is the 4th of July parade of 1968. Unfortunately, I only have one slide of the parade, and it's of, I think his first name is it Jim Burns or Bill Burns? Remember him, Gus? Anyway, he...
Him that lived right down. That was my uncle.
Okay.
Jim Burns,
Yep, okay.
the Sonic guy. Yep.
He was head of the Masons in Wisconsin.
That's my uncle.
Yep, and so he had a car with his name on it and was in the 4th of July parade. And I knew him.
That's not how he spelled his name.
Really?
B-Y-R-N-E-S.
Well, whatever.
Yeah, I think that was,
Anyway, he's sitting in the front seat. You can see him with the Shriner hat on. And he was in the 4th of July parade. Unless it's the reference to Burns is something else there, but
yeah, I think that was maybe a politician or something.
okay. But I know there were some interesting floats, and all I got was the picture of the car. Now, Gloria Hansen got really excited with a picture like this when she saw me do my retirement program 10 years ago. And she said, "Isn't that awesome? That's the old dock in Egg Harbor, how it used to be." And you see it's kind of falling down on the backside. And hey, I spent a lot of time on that dock. I did a lot of fishing. I really enjoyed it. I had no complaints. And that's me fishing. Now, I'm fishing in the back end of a boat owned by Frank Hoffman. You know, okay, he rings a bell. And Frank's claim to fame is? What? The mystery ship. Frank worked a couple of years trying to raise a boat that had sunken out in the bay, a couple of miles offshore. He had help from Jack Angerson, who also had a boat. It may have been right ahead of his, I'm not sure. And they went out to that place day after day to raise the boat. And that was it. They called it the mystery ship, although I believe it was the Alvin E. Clark they had determined was the name of it. And a huge thing. But it was a real dilemma. Unfortunately, it was ahead of its time. Because if he had done the same thing today, I'm sure the Maritime Museum would have really snatched it up from him. Back in 1968 or 9, whenever he finally raised this boat, there was no place to go with it. He had this awesome treasure out of the bottom of the bay that was like 100 years old at that point in time. And what do you do with it? Nobody wanted it. It ended up in Menominee, Michigan. And this is another picture of it. And, across the Menominee, up the river, there is a tourist park and there's a dock there. And so Menominee was willing to have him put it there, and he called it the Mystery Ship, and he sold tours of it.
I remember touring it as a little kid.
Yes. And I went on it. I knew Frank from Egg Harbor. So when I was in Menominee one day after the boat is raised and after I'd moved away to a different location, but I was back because my home was in Marinette, Menominee, so I showed up there frequently. I went over one day to visit with him, and he took me aboard the ship and showed me around. And it's an awesome thing and a great history. But without knowing in detail everything that happened, basically it became a great frustration for him. He had this great vessel he worked hard to raise. I'm sure he lost a lot of money because he put a lot into it and did not get anything back out of it. Finally, one day he burned it. Yes. He was so frustrated, it burned in the harbor at Menominee. I'm not sure what they've done with it since. They probably pulled what was left away and scrapped it. But it was very difficult. So that's the Mystery Ship went back down to the bottom. But it would have been great for the Maritime Museum this day to have that park somewhere in Door County. We used to have ice on the bay years ago. Place to go skating. I think this is up the shore from Egg Harbor to the north a little bit, where we could access the bay. We got ice fishing and snowmobiling. There's a 60s vintage snowmobile. I got a hunch this is some organized game going on with a red flag in the hole, like a golf thing or something. I can't remember exactly. Now you know where this is. This is not Egg Harbor, but this is Ephraim. Ice boating was very popular in the bay. Rolly Jorns also talked me into helping him gather sap for his maple syrup thing. So that's his son Steve there. And that's Steve also, and Raleigh on the tractor. I don't know if he still uses this system or not. He probably does. And the shed where he cooks it, and I think he's improved and enlarged a little bit since back then. And that's Raleigh there watching water boil. Pictures of cherry blossoms. And I finally figured out yesterday where this was, and I know this is coming down the hill again, down the Ames Hill in the town, looking toward the Alpine to the left, the bluff over there. Again, the church, this would be over toward where the old school used to be. You can see you see the new church and the steeple of the old church, so you know it's from the south. It's got to be back on School Road somewhere, looking across what is now all area that has become part of the village. That's a youthful Ken there in a cherry orchard. Look at the nice blossoms we had. Those are apple trees, I would think. That's my wife. And we would get invited to pick cherries every once in a while for fun. And we had good friends who ran the Horseshoe Bay Farms. That was the Erickson family back in the 60s, Howard Erickson. And his father ran it before Howard did. And what was his father's name? Howard's father? Elric, yep. And this is Jeannie Erickson on the right, who's now Jeannie Bernard. Teaches in Sturgeon Bay. I don't know who the little girl is. And so that is how cherries were taken from the tree and run to market, put in boxes. And while we were here, suddenly one day across the road from the church, guess what showed up? A cherry shaker. In a moment of time, life changed. No more picking. And this is Murphy Moore's orchard right across the road from the church where the trio would be, that area. And had his workers in here shaking cherries. And related to that is, this is kind of blurry, but in our church we had day school for migrant children. Now, with the coming of the cherry picker, of course, the need for the numbers of migrants changed dramatically, but this was still when they were picking by hand. And here's a picnic that was held for the families, migrant families. And looks like maybe Murphy Park. I'm not sure where it would have been. So I was here in the day of a lot of migrant camps. And just going around the county, you know where this picture is, Whitefish Bay. And you people can help me with this one, but I think it's the the Murphy Park breakwater. And here's another picture of it. Is that how it looked back in the 60s? The bluff at Peninsula State Park. This would be I think this is Ephraim, but it could be Sister Bay. Which one is it? It's Ephraim, yep, okay. Yeah, but you can tell by the islands and stuff, but I wasn't sure. Hill 17 in the park. Got a lot of use. So I used to take groups of kids out there all the time tobogganing. How about North Ski Ridge? That's the only place I ever skied in my life. Again, it was a Boy Scout activity, and so I had to go skiing. It was a great ski hill. This is where Little Sweden now exists. This is the choir at Sevastopol High School. Any of you on this picture? Be 68 probably, 67, 68. My wife was the director. Anybody? Okay. I can't tell you any names. She told me a few of the names when she looked at it, but when I was here in the 60s, another new thing happened. The cherry pickers came in, that was new. The trout and the salmon were planted, and we first caught the first ones. This was Lily Bay. This was at Lily Bay. The stream is just up the picture a ways. Every morning at dawn, the avid fishermen would gather along the shore, would wade in, and cast out to catch, I think this was autumn maybe, brown trout. And if some people would they would troll from a rowboat up and down the shoreline. Large collections of fishermen, because it was brand new stuff and we were catching big fish. Something else that has changed a bit in time. This is, you recognize this as the Boynton Chapel at Bjorklanden. Back in my day, during the summertime, every Wednesday, the Boyntons had pastors come out to do services in the chapel for tourists. So we do like a 15-minute little worship service, a little devotional thought, and run groups through, probably 6 groups, maybe more in a Wednesday afternoon. And only seats, like 20 or 25, maybe you'd squeeze in there, if you've ever been in it. And through this, I got to know the Boyntons, Don and Winifred. This was their house that they lived in right adjacent to the chapel. And so they would invite us pastors who they invited to do the services come to their home, and we'd have a little luncheon and get to know each other, and we would set up the schedule for the summertime. And I don't know if you know the Boyntons, but Don owned a fleet of Great Lakes vessels, and so he would stand on the shoreline. You could see the shoreline of Lake Michigan's here, and he had his binoculars, could watch his boats go by. And Winifred was the artist. She built the chapel and did all of this art, the woodwork in it and the artwork. And on the table in the back, I have a book that she gave to all of us. Each one of us got a book from her on the building of the chapel and all of the artwork she did. And you may look at it after if you want to. It's called Faith Builds a Chapel. So this is Bailey's Harbor, but I thought it'd be of interest because the house has since burned down, I believe. It's not there any longer. And they gave the property to Lawrence University, as you know, and Lawrence has expanded and changed what it does. This is just an incidental picture again of on the bay. This is Helen Schuyler. Remember Helen? Maybe you don't. She goes back a ways. Gus would remember her. Excuse me, and my wife, and they took us out bass fishing one day. Harry, her husband Harry, who is here, took people out fishing. You know, he's a commercial fisherman, and he took groups out or people out. And so we had a good time one day in their boat around in the bay. This is Fish Creek, Founders Square. The only picture I have of it. My wife and my sister on the left, my wife with my son Andrew in front of one of the stores there. One of the first fish boils in Door County was done by the Fish Creek Community Church. Every summer, we do 2 of them as fundraisers. And I know since I've been here, this last time I came back in '94, I've been called by people to try to get information on where the first fish boil began and who started it. We know the Viking restaurant goes back a ways, and they're very famous for the fish boils. But this church did them before I got there in '65, and I'm sure at least for 5 years or more. So I don't know if they began the fish boil or just were one of the early churches to use it. And we had quite a gathering. We had a lot of people would show up for the fish boils. And even while I was here, we went from 2 a summer to 1 a summer. It was a lot of work. And I think the people petered out and they didn't want to continue it. But I can't think of his first name. On the left is McKenzie. His last name is McKenzie. I think his wife was Virginia McKenzie.
Just Kinsey.
Kinsey. Yep, Kinsey. Gotcha. Yep, you're right. Thank you.
Virginia was a teacher.
Yes, okay. Yep. And she was the one who was doing work on it, trying to figure out who began the fish boils up here. That's Zion Church. It has changed. They've added a room on the end we're looking at on that side, a fellowship room. That's the one of the churches I had. And I throw that in there. That's me holding a rainbow trout, I think it is. And it's one of those early fish. One of the first years we were fishing down at the Egg Harbor dock when the fish started coming in. And that's what you could go down and catch. In the morning, if you had a little time, I'd go down there and see who was down there. I'd meet. People were coming from all over the state to the Egg Harbor dock to catch fish. And so I'd go down there and check them all out, see who they were. And minister friends would show up. And so anyway, this was, that's probably about a 20-inch fish there. It was quite a thrill. And I'd go down there and, some of our famous people, like Roy Oshkosh, Chief Oshkosh, he was down there fishing. I went down there one day to see what was going on, and Roy had a fish on that he could not land. And he was sweating and working, trying to bring in this fish. And I was watching and helping as I could, but you can't really help a guy bring in a fish. I mean, he has to do that by himself. And so I had him go off of the dock and go along the shore so he could beach this fish. It turned out to be like a 32 or 34-inch northern trout that he had on. Northern pike, not northern trout, but northern pike. He was so elated, the guy was just going crazy. He caught this big fish. And, Roy Oshkosh has a great history in Door County, and I used to go to his amphitheater and do things some days. I forget all the different things were going on there. So I got to know Roy, and I did, unfortunately, officiate at the funeral of his wife who died while I was in Egg Harbor, his wife Ruth. Austin Fraser was another one who liked to fish, and he'd be down there fishing with us, and the artist. And so a lot of people gathered at the Egg Harbor dock back in the old days when it didn't look so pretty, but it sure was functional. The fish didn't care. They came in. And this was like first thing in the spring, like right now when the ice went out, as soon as there was a crack in the ice, you got your line in there. That's where the fish were and were waiting. I used to ice fish down on the harbor too, and a bunch of guys would gather and drill holes in the ice around the dock. And one of the sadder stories is that one of the regular ice fishermen was Randy Wagner, just a young boy out of high school for a bit. And it was like in February, and Randy had been drafted to go into the service. He was going and ended up going to Vietnam. And I saw him in February when he left, and in July I did his funeral. He had got killed over there. That's my father with my wife. And what do you do with a trout when you catch one? Boil it. Or catch 2 or 3. Then you got something really to work on. And so we had our own private fish boils and borrowed the gear from Harry Schuyler. And I'm throwing the kerosene on. Everybody is running. You all recognize this probably, the Door County Memorial Hospital. That's how it looked when it was brand new. Not too much. It was a pretty simple building. And another interesting story surrounding that hospital. This is me and my son Andrew. He was born there in 1968. And of course, we left here and moved to other communities around the state. He grew up, went to college, got a job working for the YMCA, worked in Wisconsin Rapids, worked in Oconto, Wisconsin, and then went out to Syracuse, New York. And then after 9/11, the jobs shrunk a bit, so suddenly his position was not needed. And so he called one day and said, "Dad, we're going to move back to Wisconsin." He and his wife, and he had a daughter. And he said, "Can you find me a place to live in Sturgeon Bay?" And so about a month later, he came back in a moving van to Sturgeon Bay, and we had found him a duplex to live in. And so the job hunt was on when he got here. He had no job. He and his wife came here with no jobs. His wife, Dina, is now running Boettcher Communications in Sturgeon Bay. She began with The Advocate and moved up to having her own business. And Andrew connected with the YMCA here in Sturgeon Bay and was in charge of their money raising, fundraising. And then who hired him next? The hospital that he was born in. So now he's working for the hospital foundation. I think it's kind of a cute story because, we didn't stay here all that time, but he was born there, we left, came back, and he got a job at the hospital he was born in. I don't have a picture of him, how he looks today, but he's 44 years old or whatever. Something like that. And every good slideshow ends with a sunset, right? So this would be overlooking the bay from across from the church, from our house there. And so that is the end. So if anybody has any other observations or questions, we certainly can have a discussion here. I don't know if I can answer questions, but anyone, any thoughts? I said it all. Yes.
Determine where the mystery ship was made and for what purpose?
I don't know anything about the history of the mystery ship. No. I only know it sunk out there a long time ago, and So, but I'm sure you could find it. I'm sure you go on the internet, you'd find the Mystery Shipper. I think the Alvin E. Clark was the name of it, something like that, and there'd be something on it. Any other additions? Yeah.
Just want to say that I had your wife for a chorus teacher in 7th and 8th grade in Sebastopol.
And your name is?
My name is Don Rudolph, and she was a wonderful teacher.
Great. She runs into her students all the time, you know, or we hear about them on the radio or whatever, you know. Thad Ash, the county, was he head of the highway department? He was one of her, you know, she had him in school. Jay Zahn, she had in school. Half the Bernard kids, you know, and we know them yet today. And so it was kind of fun for her to come back and run into all of her students. And she only taught for 3 years, but she had fun doing it. Was glad to do it. So, any other thoughts? Well, it's good to have you all here tonight. Appreciate you coming, and I hope maybe you saw something here that you didn't see before, or something that brought some good memories back to you, or whatever. And when you go by the United Methodist Church in Egg Harbor, you maybe will have a new appreciation for what it looked like when it was being built. So it was quite a feat and a great project. So anyway, thank you.
Ken, you want to come up, Gloria? She's got a few things for you, Ken. Thanks a lot. Tremendous. Brings back a lot of memories.
If you keep walking, there's no calories.
A bakery has come through. Thank you so much.
I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. I hope everyone else enjoyed it too.
You know, one thing I was going to talk about too, and not just to extend the program, but you know, walking through town is, I just wished I'd known I was going to do this. I'd have gone downtown, had every storekeeper stand in front of the store, take their picture, you know, so you have something like that. But you know, Frank Schneider ran the grocery store, a nice grocery store, wonderful meat department, and we bought a lot of stuff there. Herb Anschutz was the postmaster while we were here. I mentioned Joe Schneider ran the restaurant next door to us. Bob Sawyer had one of the taverns in town. Frank Hoffman, the
Mojo's.
Mojo's now, okay. Frank Hoffman, who raised the boat.
Frank had the anchor. Sawyer's had Mojo's.
Yeah, Sawyer's had Mojo's. Frank Hoffman had the Anchor Inn, yes. And then Murphy Moore was on the corner. And Lautenbach's had, I think they still have their restaurant, what's it called? Casey's, yeah. And so some have not changed too much, but those are some of the people around town. And the bakery back then was excellent. It was only in the summertime that was open, but we enjoyed that too. So, but you know, these are things that I didn't take pictures of that I wish I had to share and even remember. But
We're glad that you have as many as you have.
it was good to share.
Ken, you can enjoy this bread from McGreedy's, but you can sit back on the recliner also. We also have the copy of the volume 1 and 2 of our Egg Harbor Family Memories.
Thank you so much. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I will appreciate that. Thank you.